Welcome to Thought Leadership and the FinTech Revolution, brought to you by the brilliant people at Chargebacks911 and Fi911. I am Scott David Pinsker, and I'll be your pilot while we take a trek down the FinTech wormhole. For our maiden journey, we'll be joined today by two unusually forward-thinking gentlemen, Gary Cardone, not only the chief executive of Chargebacks911, but the co-founder, ownership, and a painter too. Additionally, for our maiden journey, we'll call it an Iron Maiden journey in honor of their country of origin, Tony Craddock, the Director General of EPA, the Emerging Payments Association. And for our Iron Maiden show, before we run to the hills, we need to tell you what kind of program we're going to be. After all, we're a totally new show with a totally new approach. And to do that, I'll begin by telling you what we're not. Often we can better define who we are with a negative. One, we're not going to be a long-form infomercial. Look, Chargebacks911 is a great company, and if you're an online merchant or online at all, and you want to make more money and get rid of fraud and theft and chargebacks so you can go back to what you love to do and get rid of that headache, go give them a call and they'll take great care of you. And if you're a payment professional and you want to elevate your game and network and collaborate with phenomenal people, go join the EPA. But beyond that, we're not here to market to you. We're here to inform and entertain. Two, we won't be the kind of show where everyone will agree all the time. We want there to be heated, passionate debate. We want to watch the intellectual firepower of two men like Gary Cardone and Tony Craddock going back and forth. Now, we don't want to go too far in the wrong direction and turn into a WWE Hulk Hogan fake eye gouging kind of thing, brother. But to me, hearing two brilliant men full of passion and opinionated and really willing to go out on a limb, when you hear men like that debate, yeah, you're entertained, but you learn a lot too. We're going to be the kind of show where when we're done the following day, would you take a meeting with a valued client or a colleague you're trying to wow, or having a make or break cup of coffee with ownership, we're going to give you a really good topic to talk about. Food for thought till you're overfed. Think of our show as a FinTech thought experiment. We'll take a trend or an idea and play with it and contort it and break it down. And when we're done, you'll look at it differently. And then it'll all be up to you. All right, enough of me talking. Let me get to my question so I can shut up, enjoy a Diet Coke, and get giddy at all the bloodletting that'll be coming, hopefully. I want to begin with a critical foundational payment question about who we are, where we're going, and why. About a decade ago, Malcolm Gladwell introed the world to the outlier theory. In part, Gladwell predicted that if you want to truly shatter the paradigm, if you want to redefine the game and change the world, you got to put in 10,000 hours. For example, John, Paul, George, and Ringo didn't land in America out of the blue and get lucky. They honed their craft in Liverpool in any little club that would have them for hour after hour after hour. And then they became the Beatles. But more particularly, you can apply the outlier theory to technological development. Orville and Wilbur Wright didn't wake up one day and invent the airplane. They reconfigured their bike shop and dedicated 10,000 hours. And in 1903, they managed to fly. And then more people built on what they did, dedicated many more hours, and within one human lifetime, we're literally walking on the moon. In fact, earlier in the month, we landed a rover in a Martian crater, and the entire world watched in wonder. Now, compare that to the payment world. I'm pretty sure we've been trading with money and making payments prior to 1903. In fact, we found metal coins dating back to 5000 BC. The first written language was in 3200 BC. We've been working on the payment problem before we could even write about the payment problem. Each of you, Gary and Tony, know many brilliant payment professionals who've dedicated much more than 10,000 hours. Think of all that collective brain power. Way more people have worked in payments than in rocketry, right? Other than war. More people have probably worked longer and harder, both directly and indirectly, in payments than pretty much any other human profession. You'd think we'd be better at it than anything by now. Like we have it all figured out and we're great at it. Yet here we are in 2021 at a point in time where our children may one day hitch a ride to the Martian planet with our pal Elon, head on over to the Martian Holiday Inn, and their credit card won't work. Shouldn't we be a lot further along than we are? Like, do we need more time? Maybe another millennium or 5? Are we too dumb to figure out a predictable, reliable, efficient, and fair payment methodology? Or, gentlemen, do we have a different kind of problem altogether? Maybe there are a lot of hyper intelligent, deeply capable people who are profiting from our problems. Maybe they put in their time too, and they're dedicating their know how to perpetuating an unfair profit model, and they want a modicum of fraud, corruption, theft, and leakage. Therefore, maybe we have a payment problem that we can never really correct or cure, and we're trapped in a never-ending game of Tom and Jerry, the Joker and Batman, good and evil. Tony, what do you think about where we are, where we should be, and what the heck we can do about it? Or, in the immortal words of Axl Rose, where do we go? Where do we go now?
Scott, thank you. What a great opening. Where on earth do we go now? Well, of course, you've got to go back a little bit before you go forward. And the first thing to remember is the movement of money, which is what payments is really all about, is fundamental to the way in which we relate as human beings. So you look at the fundamentals of a relationship. The thing that we really, really care for more than anything else in the world is how I give value to you and how you give value to me. And as we've learned to evolve as human beings, we've become able to trade with each other. We have found ways of exchanging that value in a way that's possible beyond just one-to-one. And that's really where money and currencies came from. And what I really completely agree with you about is that we ain't got it sorted yet. It's not the perfect scenario. The way in which we move money is not totally secure. The way in which we do it is not instant, is not completely free, and it's not completely value adding. So there's still a long way to go. Of course, the reason it's been set up as it is because it is so important, it matters to people. So if I were to give you a wad of dollar bills, you'd be quite happy.
Sure.
But I'll tell you what, Mrs. Craddock behind the scenes would be less happy. So it is worth something to you. So this is where we have to be very careful to manage the security of the system. Security of the system is absolutely paramount. And because we're all keen on these wonderfully complex systems to support the security, the movement, and the exchange of money between us in a way that's predictable and secure and safe, we have to incur some costs in doing that. And that's a fundamental issue here, is there is some cost attached to this because we need to be rewarded. We need to reward the retailers. We need to reward the manufacturers. We need to reward those people involved with management and the movement of money. The question you're asking is a great one, is the wage that the industry is getting too high? And I would put it to you that yes, it is. There is too much friction in the way in which people are moving money. There is too much time. There's not enough accountability, and there's not enough access. So our industry has a long way still to go. Having said that, I believe, and I'm sure you'll agree as well, Gary, we've come quite a long way compared to where we used to be.
Well, yeah, we've come a long way since the caveman, for sure. And really appreciate Scott, the webinar. I think this is going to be a lot of fun, the podcast, whatever we call these nowadays. I'm not sure what the question is. A couple of things that Tony mentioned was about security and friction. And I've only been in the payments industry for I guess, there's 8,760 hours in a year. I've never heard the 10,000 hour rule. I need to read that book. I do believe in it. I do believe that anything you do for long periods of time, even if you're not good at it, if you don't think you're good at it, if you do enough of something over and over and over, you'll get great at it. And that will be the only way you'll get great at it. But for 10 years, I've heard this issue as security. And I didn't grow my career in this industry, I grew my career in the energy business, where security is very important, because when power or natural gas doesn't show up like it did in Texas, people either pay too much or they go cold. And I have yet to see a tremendous amount of security issues in the payments industry. I don't see people losing massive amounts of money, people going bankrupt from credit defaults and NSF. And I do see a lot of declines. I see a lot of friction. I see a lot of people saying there's a lot of security issues. But really the proof is, other than airlines going bust and large bankruptcy events, which is a very common problem for most industries when they're upside down, their hedges aren't set correctly, they don't have right insurance, or they have dirty hedges, as what's going on in Texas right now. That's when they have credit problems, or they have, shall we say, lack of credibility in reporting of their annual reports, the Enron incident, or incidents, I should probably say, that whole sector. So security to me, I mean, Tony, what you built the case for in your eloquent way is that cryptocurrency is just the perfect solution, except for the momentum and volume. Everything you're a crypto guy, man. Everything you just said was, please.
Yeah. And you know what, there is something about the evolution of cryptocurrencies. And I'll never forget, the first time I encountered this was 2014. And I went off to a conference in the Netherlands. And there were 500 people there, all, you know, blockchain, Bitcoin. It's a Bitcoin Foundation there. And there was a real sense of this being a social movement to change the way in which we manage the financial value in our system, and it's got a lot to be going for it. However, and I'm going to call on you for this one, Gary, because I know we don't often hear of security problems, but this morning, as I came back from my a few laps around Battersea Park in South London on the bike. My neighbor said to me, "Oh, I hear you know a bit about payments." I said, "Yeah." He said, "I had a couple of Bitcoin, and I bought them a couple of years ago, and I had them in a wallet, and on Tuesday they just disappeared." So and I call that theft. So what's happened is he's been hacked. Somebody's come in. A couple of Bitcoin is worth what, $100,000 plus or so, and that's quite a serious. Now you go to the police, they will ring, they will not do anything. So the police don't know how to handle this stuff. And now let me give you another statistic. It's an interesting one. In this country, we have something called suspicious activity reports, or SARs. And as a bank, if there's a movement of money that looks suspicious, I am obliged to report it to the authorities. Absolutely obliged. So I might be a payments issuer, I might be an e-money association or e-money company or a bank. And there's tens of millions of these each year. 99% of them, that's 1 in 100, get investigated. And last year, that's in 2019, I can only give you the data for that, 55 of these suspicious activity reports followed through with a prosecution. So of these tens of millions of occasions where the suspicious activity, which might be fraudulent, might be money laundering, might be theft or fraud, only a tiny proportion are being caught. And I just don't think we're doing a good enough job. That's why Chargebacks is doing such a great job and playing an important role, because you've got to help people to complete the transactions that are authentic and stop the ones that are not. But I think it's an endemic problem in our industry. I think we've got to do something about it.
Yeah, I think it may be the way the paradigm was set up, and I think that's what innovation is really bringing. Is that the comment you made was that the crypto guys, and I don't know a lot about blockchain or crypto. I have a few investments. I do hold a little bit of crypto. I'm not sure how to access it. I think 20% of all crypto is like people don't really know how to get into it. That's not unusual for a nascent industry, though. The things that people talk about crypto, I mean, the alcohol industry was built on bootlegging. And so most industries are built on the edges. In fact, I would say that all industries are built off into the rough, And then as it becomes mainstream, it becomes more in the middle of the fairway. Everybody plays by a set of rules. It's always the entrepreneurs, maybe at one point are called the criminals, who then develop great ideas, and then they become mainstream. John Kennedy, the entire Kennedy family was found on illegal bootlegging. So I think the point you made about the crypto world, though, and social, that it's a social group. Money is a social interaction. Money and the transfer of goods and services and bartering is the way you and I communicate. Okay, you and I, the last time 2 years ago, I was in London when it was an open society. Sorry, I had to plug the political point there. When there was an open society on this planet, you and I had a beer. In fact, that day there was a terrorist act, if you'll remember. And you and I had a couple of beers in a bar. And you and I could not have done that had you and I not had some currency, some interest in each other. Okay, that's a currency. It's just not a liquid, commoditized, fungible currency. There's a lot of people that don't want to have a beer with me because I do funny cartoons. But some people that do want to have a beer or a Coke with me or whatever, we then traded money with the bartender, Sterling, who took the risk to have rent, cost of maids and waiters and waitresses. And we had a good time, and that created a social experience for us. So I think money is only about a social experience, and social experiences with lots of friction create communication problems.
That's true.
And I appreciate that you may have had a ton of, issues in the UK last year that went under investigated. There's about 72 murders in Illinois this week, and most of them will go under investigated. Okay, there's a lot of stuff that goes under investigated that's probably more serious than some guy from the Middle East bringing in cocaine money and then, moving it through an Indian restaurant, which you guys have a lot of Indian restaurants.
We do. We have more than our fair share.
All day long. 3 people all day long eat there. These are big red flags that could be investigated, and they're not.
It's just such a shame. I was going to come to Illinois for my summer holidays, and I think I'm just going to cancel that right away.
See, that's the problem, though. You don't want to cancel something because it's not working well. But when you get into the friction and the security issues, thank you, Bobby. For instance, can you really fathom to believe that there's close to $500 billion between the United Kingdom? This is a really interesting stat. I think the number's around 400 billion. I'll round it up to 500, $500 billion. It just sounds so sexy. $500 billion in declines on credit cards. Now, a decline should be about non-sufficient funds or fraud, true criminal fraud. I can fathom that there would be $500 billion in the teens percentages of declines on credit cards if it is truly NSF and if it's truly stolen credit cards. I have never had my credit card stolen ever in my life. Then we have a fundamentally much larger problem, and everyone in the payments industry other than the fraud companies are grossly overvalued. Because you can't have Bitcoin as a percentage, and I'm not promoting Bitcoin, that's not my point. And by the way, I think already 98% of you and Ms. Craddock's transactions are already digital crypto transactions. Okay, they're just on platforms that are legacy platforms. You see very little of your money. Okay, most of it's in digits. And if you go to your Lloyd's Bank down the road, try and grab 50,000 notes, 50,000 pounds of 50-pound beautiful pink notes with the Queen's face on. Very challenging to do.
Can't get them anymore.
Well, a wild idea, crypto by a different name altogether. It kind of beckons the question, though, that for financial technology, are we lagging behind the technological development of other industries? And if we are, why? Gary, you and Monica Eden Cardone created Chargebacks911, and you didn't do it because you have a perfect payment world. You did it to correct a problem. You had a problem. You were a victim of the problem, and you tried to figure out a way to make it better. And for the big picture approach, you know, after you hit like 35 or 40, you go to the doctor, you tell them that you have a pain, and they tell you, well, you're old, your body's breaking down, we can help you manage the pain, but we can't really get rid of it. And I wonder if that might be the dynamic going on in the payment world.
Can I just start with an answer to that one, Gary? I think one of the reasons why we have built a system to manage payments, typically run by big banks, is because we're talking about things that people want to steal. So it has to be secure, and it's secured by regulations to ensure we trust each other. That's what regulations are for. I know that when I use my card in Illinois, I know that the money will be taken out of my bank down in downtown London. So I know that the system works. All of that has to be run by organizations that typically got very big. Now, Americans, you've done a great job. You've got 10,000 banks. Over here in this country, there's 5 or 6 banks dominate 80% of the banking. We're in a situation where these very big companies set up in fortresses, essentially. I don't know whether anybody's seen the Bank of England. It is literally a fortress in the middle of London, because that's where they used to keep the gold. And banks are typically like that. But the banks now know they have to release, they have to open up, they have to engage with the fintech early stage companies. And those are many of the ones who are members of our community. Gary's company is very active in our community because you're pushing the boundaries and you're working with banks, and they want to work with fintechs, and they're just learning how to. It's a mindset shift. It's about doing business in a way that's new and different. And I'd love to get your views on this, actually, because I think in our industry, the days of buying and selling have gone. I think the days of collaborating and partnering as a way of helping each other make money is the only way forward. And so I keep on telling people, don't just spend all your time being a salesman. I mean, I'm a salesman. My background is sales, but I have to put that hat off and I have to think, how are we going to sit around the same side of the table together and collaborate to our mutual benefit and the benefit of the collective good? And if we can do that, then actually we'll be more successful and make more money than if we do it the old way.
So I think that not all industries work the way the payments industry works. I think there's some really very, very large industries that work extremely well. And if you follow or differentiate the paradigm of how the payments industry works, which is extremely fragmented. You say you only have 4 or 5 banks and that the US has 10,000. I think there's 14,000 issuers in the United States. There's thousands of acquiring banks. There's the Federal Reserve, which is kind of a bank, but you and I, along with the Bank of England, are not invited into those banks. Those are very different banks. Those are what I call guardian banks or matriarchal banks that set up. They're the prime alpha dog of this scenario. And I think what we're going through is because of the digitization of this planet in mass. 2001, computers really began to sing. And the manufacturing speed of chips and the processing power, really we have a wave that is hitting this planet, at least in our recent memory, because I think that people have been around, humans or humanoids or some shape of humans have been around probably close to 750,000 years. And we've lost kind of some memory and some writing. But the wave of change that is occurring is so staggering. I am fortunate enough to be old enough to have gone through some of these transitional waves, either driven through, my first career, it was driven through regulatory change. This change that's occurring right now, regulators are grossly resisting it because most of the regulators are very confused. They don't understand what's happening. They're also, been serving the large banks. These are massive, massive companies that have a really large position to lose. And for me to say that maybe there's vested interest, but the reason Chargebacks911, the reason Monica built this business was that no one actually helped us. They actually profited from the problem, but no one was actually trying to solve the problem. And if I was going to a doctor who served me and Monica the way the doctor served me in chargebacks, I'd be dead. Okay, I would literally be dead. I actually believe in going to doctors on a regular basis before there's a problem. I'm one of the few people on the planet that will literally spend money with doctors and go, hey, keep me healthy and well.
That's cool.
So my point is, this change is occurring so radically that the very fabric, I think all the friction you talked about and the friction those are symptoms. And it's becoming really clear that this fragmentation of massive amounts of banks and an extremely complex food chain, and I use the word food chain specifically because everyone is eating from the table. The question is, who's actually bringing a quality product and service to the table? And it is in that food chain, that complex food chain, where all the rules are different for everyone. There is vested interest at every little particle inside that food chain. It's an extremely complex food chain, from consumer to retailer, okay? And then the deposits of money and the credits and the withdrawal. It's 150 years old, the whole paradigm, okay?
I mean, it's very clever. It's a very clever setup. Let's not, I mean,
look, Monopoly's a clever game, okay?
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a lot of clever things, but in a world where speed is everything and where efficiency is everything, it is staggering to me that there would ever be a decline. In a central depository marketplace on energy, there are no declines. There are only transactions. There's only good credit and bad credit, and the bad credit can't play in that game, or they pay more for the credit because there's insurance companies that give those guys credit. This paradigm is falling apart. It's getting obliterated, not because guys like me, it's getting obliterated because it is an old suitcase that's trying to carry way too much weight through the airport, and it's just ripping apart at the seams. And it's offering a massive opportunity to innovative thinkers who aren't carrying any of those bags whatsoever. They're actually looking at it going, my God, this thing's falling apart. There's too many amateurs in it. There's too many people feeding at the trough. And who is it charging? Joe consumer is being slaughtered, okay, with ghost tax, ghost fees, declines, friction, and the poor retailer is getting hammered. I mean, just look what's happening to the retailer because the consumer wants speed, efficiency, refunds, and ease.
And consumers are also smart enough to find ways around the system as well, aren't they? I mean, I say smart enough. They're often more qualified. The fraudsters are more qualified than the people who are protecting them from fraud, and we have to be aware that that's the case. And so there's a real tension at the moment, I think, Gary, and I think Scott, you might agree with this too. There's a tension between, on the one hand, we want to bring the new, exciting, progressive, innovative solutions, the new tech, the new approaches to doing things, the new products and services to help to solve some of these problems. At the same time, we have to be aware that if we are not absolutely confident that these are rock solid, prevent fraud, and essentially wrap up the transaction in a bandage of, or in a wrap of security, then we'll end up bringing new stuff in, and it'll just end up with everybody suffering because there'll be a massive fraud. And look at, I mean, you remember the early days of Bitcoin? Do you remember something called Mt. Gox? And there was something like 30 billion Bitcoins that were just lost because somebody did something wrong in the tech. When we're beyond that with cryptocurrencies, I think and hope, but maybe in some parts of payments, we bring in new things, and it's risky. So there's my point is, there's a tension between.
But Tony, that's not fair. Okay? Everybody picks on Bitcoin and pulls these little stories. I mean, 2008, we had a colossal meltdown of every financial bank on the planet And we kind of forget that 12 years later, it's kind of like we're still talking about something that happened to Bitcoin, which was a very, very immature market. I mean, I know so many guys that went bankrupt in the energy business that were brilliant, okay? But they were in so deep over their skis in a marketplace they didn't understand, with massive volatility, and they got crushed like little worms. And it didn't make them bad. They were in the wrong place at the wrong time and just got hit.
Yeah.
People in Bitcoin, look, I have Bitcoin. I wouldn't know how to access it right now. Okay. It's because I took a punt a long time ago. It wasn't really relevant to me. I'm sure it's on Coinbase. I'm sure I'll figure it out when it becomes important.
Yes.
But the financial meltdown that we had 8 years ago in 2008 is so destabilizing, because I have young kids. I look at this and go, my God, after 150 years, we're still playing hide the monkey. Okay. We're still playing, hey, it's just too big to fail. There is nothing too big to fail except God. Like, I don't believe this. Okay. That is not a capital market. A capital market is you and I can trust it to work.
But I think are we not bringing even more problems along amongst ourselves at the moment with some of these new derivative trading products, which change the way in which we're changing how we invest money. It's fascinating, it's progressive, it's exciting, it's innovative. It's also pretty risky, isn't it, Gary? Look at the recent stories of GameStop and everything that happened there. That was a market contortion as a result of social media's enthusiasm for a particular stock, and lots of people got burnt. And that's simply endorsing your point, really, that 10, 11, 12, 13 years after the 2007-8 crash, we're still not in a position to be able to know how to manage some of these new products.
Well, listen, I think it's a good point. However, I think that we started this conversation off. We said money is very, very akin to social, like it is a social concept.
Yeah.
I think one of the great failures that your country and my country, I'll just speak to the two countries I really know the best. A real basic problem is education. Okay, because when you slaughter and suggest, hey, these derivative products, do you own a house?
Yes.
Are you sure? Because I would bet you do not own that house. I bet you own a derivative of that house. You've been trading derivatives for a long time.
Yeah, well, if I don't own it, then I've been getting away living here for 20 years. That's a good deal.
Well, it's been a good deal, okay, but mortgages are derivative. And so the GameStop, I think, I get to my education point. The GameStop, we can pick out a lot of little anomalies. These are markets, okay? These are markets. And when people do what they do in mass, it drives markets. And if people are highly educated, I wanted to short GameStop so badly, and I was too busy to do it. And the guy was like, dude, really? I would have made an absolute fortune. Education, though. There are hardly anyone listening to this webinar that could draw you and I a picture of how money is created and moves through the system. Hardly anyone. In fact, I would suggest that less than 1% of everyone listening, I hope there's 1 million people listening to this bloody thing, I will give you $100 grand if there's more than 1% of the people for your next charity that can draw out how money in your country is made and how money in my country is made. There's no education. Even from the people running the bloody show, there's no education.
I tell you, the thing that was quite reassuring, we did some work with the Financial Conduct Authority, and they were working with essentially the equivalent of the Fed, the Treasury here. And we came up with 5 or 6 things that they wanted to see out of the payments industry. And one of these 5 top priorities was they wanted to see more what they called the professionalization of payments. They wanted to see more people understanding how it worked. That's just to reinforce your point. We have some online training courses, and we just did some with Visa earlier in the year. 600 people signed up for a training course. There's People know that it's a problem, Gary, and I do agree with you. It's a complicated setup, though. It's
Yeah, but
not simple.
Tony, I'm talking about education when you're 4 years old, 5 years old.
Okay,
I'm talking about basic education on what is the compounding of money? How do you invest? What is a derivative versus an investment? What's a mortgage really? I know very few people that own their home.
Gary,
I know a lot of banks that own homes, and a lot of people own the obligation. Excuse me, Scott. They own the obligation to pay a bill, but very few people own their own home.
Yeah.
Yet most people believe they own one. Sorry if that was a setup on you, but it's normal.
No, it's fine.
Sorry, Scott.
No, not a problem. I'm enjoying hearing y'all talk. But my question, though, Gary, you're really hammering away at education, economic education. And I'm wondering, how do you feel the world would be different if more people, particularly young people, were economically literate?
Well, there wouldn't be people taking out $200,000 debt to go to a school that's not even going to teach them what money's about, to go make a $50,000 a year job. They'd understand percentages. They'd understand compounding. I think they would be, look, I see people, in fact, I interviewed a kid yesterday. He's 30 years old. He wants to run his own business at 35. And I asked him why. He's like, because I want to be in control. I want to be in charge.
Mm.
Cool. Well, you're in charge right now and you're looking for a job. And so just think these fundamental things about, like, there's very little value anymore put on what everyone has to make $15 an hour. Really, I would pay someone $1,500 an hour to work for certain people. Like, my investment banker, I would pay, and I probably am paying him, but I would pay Steve just to hang out with him for 10 days and be his apprentice, okay? To learn from him. And there's no education put on there's no emphasis on even teaching people how to make money. I mean, I taught my kids.
So sorry, Gary, to jump in, but I mean, to a fundamental extent, I agree with you. But it's not just about how payments or how money works. It's a philosophical issue around the approach we make to money and the approach we make to making money. And this is whether you're an owner of the capital or whether you're owned by the capital. And most people are owned by the capital. You know, I hope that none of my team are listening to this, but honestly, they have no idea that the value of what they provide as human beings to the company that we run. There's about 20, 25 of us or so, and a small company. But, you know, every individual in there, they are absolutely uniquely valuable in their own way. You know, people don't know that worth, and they don't know how to negotiate that worth either. And it always surprises me. Yeah,
but I think that's about education. But you know, because we're getting really philosophical, but I think that if we look at, you know, what I'm excited about is that the opportunities in the payment industry, and we can sit here and be critical of it. We are where we are. And I mean, I see a couple of questions here about declines and people arguing about why declines really happen. And look, the truth is we're having massive amounts of declines. We have a lot of friction. We have fraudulent refunds. We have a lot of people feeding from the trough here that add no value. And I'm telling you, I'm an older guy here. I have nothing to win from this. It is all going to change. I don't care if you're running the show or not running the show. I don't care if your name starts with a V, an M, an A B, if you've been around 420 years as a bank in England. This game is changing so radically, there is no stopping it. And the legacy guy has more to lose, and the entrepreneur has more to gain. And Tony, you know, your point, you're like, hey, some of these new ideas, they're gonna create problems. There's already so many problems, it's ridiculous. And we're gonna learn from those problems. And out of a few of those problems, there's gonna be some awesome solutions. And I could list a whole dozens of great companies being formed right now today that are helping push this tidal wave of change. And that's got to be good, because transparency is the one thing that grossly is lacking in the legacy construct. In the legacy construct, no transparency. In the future construct, massive transparency and removing tons of middlemen.
But I think that's going to happen. That's got to happen. The challenge is, though, that when you open the door or the window and you provide the transparency, when people look in, they either don't understand or, often worse, they misunderstand. So this is where you get people criticizing the chief executive's salary. People don't understand that what this guy's done is he's staked his house, he's staked his life, he's staked his reputation, and he's working 100 hours a week. That's the sort of thing that's misunderstanding. So transparency needs to go alongside education. You must have them both together.
Yeah, I agree. I think technology gets us there.
Do you think it'll be technological development that'll get us there, or do you think we might be at a point where we need new government regulations that we can have more growth through regulatory reform than through the innovation of a company like Fi911 or Chargebacks911?
Well, Tony, if I may, okay, and with all due respect to the regulators out there, in fact, I know a guy that's listening right now that worked with me. His name's Steven. I won't tell you anymore. He's working at a major bank today in the UK. He got to know me in the United Kingdom when I was doing work with the energy minister there, Dr. M. I'll just leave it at that. She was awesome. And they grossly underestimated my understanding of markets. I think Stephen would agree with that. They kind of thought I was an oddball. And everyone said exactly what Tony just said. Hey, worry. Hey, some of these companies might get hurt. Some of these companies are going to be obliterated. Okay, obliterated. The nuclear power industry in the United Kingdom went bankrupt. And I would dare say that 1 or 2, 3 people created that bankruptcy. They lit the fuse. The people that created the bankruptcy were all the ignorant players, the legacy players that believed it could never change. And that bankruptcy, not one person lost a unit of energy. The company just went bankrupt. Okay, the power kept flowing just fine. Okay, then the Germans came in and bought it for a song. So if you can disrupt the nuclear power industry in the United Kingdom, you can disrupt a payment facilitator for sure, okay? Because these are just pieces of digits moving. It's an accounting process, guys. Payments is an accounting process with a tremendous amount of friction on a ledger.
Yeah.
Mind-boggling that you have this much friction, and it's literally an accounting process. Because, Tony, you've been doing this, 3 times as long as I have? Have you ever seen a payment?
Never seen a payment, mate. No,
you
never seen one.
See a payment, okay?
No, the numbers change on my phone. I look at the numbers in my bank account. There's something goes in, something goes out. It's just written down. I never see it. That's not a payment. That's just a bit of words on a page.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Not even a page.
But it's wonderful that it works. It's really wonderful that it works, and it's working better this year. So we're in one of the strangest of industries, because payments technology, paytech, fintech also has really benefited from the pandemic. And I know we've had a lot of casualties. I know there's a lot of grief and sadness out there, and I'm sorry for that. But you know what? It's really moved the dial in terms of encouraging people to adopt new ways of using technology. And to me, that's very cool. Very, very cool.
It's very interesting you say that. I did not think this webinar was going to go this way at all. So weird one. But it's so weird that you say that, because every industry I've been involved in, and I've just had this really blessed life of being in the right place. Monica just gave me such a gift of coming up with this idea that I thought was just dumb and dumb. And then I finally got it. I'm like, wow, this is a huge problem. But every time I've gotten into one of these bloody industries, something like COVID happens. And COVID is getting ready to push this tidal wave much, much faster. And I think you're going to see the friction explode, okay? Because there is no going back to where we came from. I asked a guy yesterday in San Francisco, I said, because people have disagreed with me that card present transactions, I said this 8 years ago, would cease to exist sometime in the near future. And he's like, Gary, that's a bit over the top. I went, when was the last time you enjoyed going to the grocery store? And the guy was like, as soon as I want to get away from my wife. I said, no, you don't go to the grocery store to get away from your wife. You go to the bar, okay? You do not go to the grocery store. The grocery store is a horrible experience. Even Whole Foods now is a horrible experience for most everyone, male or female.
Don't tell me that. That used to be my favorite store. There was once Whole Foods I used to go to in Rhode Island, and my word, it was my favorite shop.
Yeah, they're owned by a big bank now, man. So right. So I mean, look, it's a bank. So anyway, my point is that COVID is a structural change to the entire market. And it's been a godsend for Chargebacks911 because chargebacks are just insane because the system wasn't set up for card absent, but the world is set up for card absent, okay? 20-year-old kids have no interest in talking to another human being over a point of sale piece of equipment that weighs 40 pounds.
I know, that's true.
So this is a structural change and it's going to speed up and it's really exciting. So unfortunately, we're going to have to really open our arms to the innovators because the innovators don't come with this mental baggage of how it needs to work or how it should work to protect the P&L.
But what is extraordinary though, Gary, is that you would think that the increased amount of fear and aversion to risk and the potential for danger and damage and threat that results from a global pandemic should have resulted in less activity, less innovation, less investment. But do you know, we have seen a dip in the amount of investment money coming in for sure, but it's back on. I'll tell you what, very interesting. Last 3 or 4 weeks, conversations out there are definitely changing, more positive, more upbeat, more open. But because I'm not having to travel, sadly, to Florida to see you, I can actually, I can actually have a call with you today. Or we can have an email exchange today, and I can have a call with you tomorrow. Now, if I want to see the chair of our advisory board, Marion King, she's a director of payments at NatWest, they're responsible for over 20% of the UK's daily payments, a big company. I can get a meeting with her next week. Now, in the past, it would have taken 6 weeks. And so we do 6 times as many meetings, 6 times as much innovation, 6 times as much new product development. That's an incredible environment. So I think COVID has absolutely supported rather than slowed down the evolution of fintech.
Yeah, totally agree.
You know, Tony, you mentioned fear, and I want to go to that because you and Gary had a really great dialogue. I think about 90 days ago, y'all recorded an interview. It's up on YouTube. And by the way, the show that you're watching now, shout out to everyone tuning in live. We love you. We're glad you're here. We're going to be uploaded to YouTube on the Chargebacks911 channel. We'll probably have a more dedicated home down the road. Hopefully we can grow it out and you'll find what we're doing highly rewarding. But that's kind of like a snapshot for the future. For right now, going back to the word fear, when you and Gary talked, Gary, you said that you were motivated by, and I quote, fear, guilt, and insecurity. And like, truthfully, I had kind of a weird reaction to that, where on one hand, I found like great nobility in taking a negative and building from it. And I want my children to have that ability too. But on the other hand, I'm a daddy and I got a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old, and I want to shield them from pain. And I don't want them to be, I'm reluctant to join a worldview where fear, guilt, painful emotions are what will fuel you to be great. Maybe I'm being really naive and I'm showing it to everyone right now, but I don't know, as a daddy for your children, how do you feel about that?
Who's going first?
Go ahead, Tony.
So fear is healthy. Fear is something that allows you to identify risk and often what comes with risk, which is opportunity. And unless you understand that, then you'll always be running and running away rather than running towards. So it's a fundamental, you know, I look at the hundreds and thousands of people who in the last 12 months have had the courage and the boldness to start their own business because their previous lives have been folded. They didn't sit around waiting for what we call furlough. They didn't sit around taking handouts. They said, look, I'm just going to get out there and I'm going to start something because the world's changing. And when there's change Sure, there's fear, but you put fear on one side and there's opportunity on the other side of the seesaw. So you've got to have the two, Scott. You've got to embrace the fear. You've got to use it to drive the change and drive the innovation, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I think, Scott, I hear your question. And I think if you interview, and hopefully this podcast will interview a lot of innovators and entrepreneurs. And look, I don't know how many people are watching this or will watch this, but I know a lot of my buddies that are, senior VPs, presidents of banks, running fraud divisions at monster banks. And look, there's two types of fear, right? There's the fear of, what Tony explained was someone who was basically, the bridge was taken away from them. They didn't have a job. And instead of becoming a parasite on the system, they went out to get a job. And they didn't really care if they were washing a window or doing whatever was necessary. And I actually believe in that. I would rather wash someone's window than take a subsidy from any government on this planet, okay? That's the first lesson to my kids. Go to work, don't expect the government or anybody else to feed you. They're already broke, okay? And so, I'm pretty sure they can't do it. So if my kids have an education and they understand how to do general math, they'll figure out what they need to charge to clean somebody's window. And if they have good ethics and good discipline, then they'll be able to clean a window better than other people. What I meant to say around fear was the question that Tony said, hey, where does your motivation come from? And when I look around at people, I have always been a little scared. I'm scared to do this, okay? I'm terrified to do this. Now, why did I choose to come down here today? Because I'm at a point with my painting that I need to go public. I don't really know if anybody likes this or not. This is my way of saying, you know what? I am going to become an artist, and I'm actually saying it to the world. I will have less. I'm like a gay guy coming out of the closet. Now, I've never been gay. I don't really get it. I don't understand that deal. But now I understand coming out of the closet, right? And I'm trying to come out of the closet because for me, every time I have confronted if I have a goal in life and then I start telling people, this is what I am going to create. I've had people in the UK that looked at me and said, you're absolutely mad. In fact, that guy's probably heard those conversations that I talked about earlier. This guy's completely crazy. But I become so convinced in this that by promoting it, even though it's terrifying for me. 3 days ago, I had somebody in my company say, hey, you can't keep posting stuff like this online on LinkedIn because you're going to offend some consultants. I'm like, dude, I'm not trying to offend anyone. Okay? I'm trying to make people laugh. Okay. I think it's hilarious how many awesome people I've met.
But the good news is, Gary, for the one person who's a little upset, you'll get 95 people who you'll give a good laugh to. And I absolutely commend your boldness for coming out with your art. I think it's great. It's on the edge, and it's wonderful expression of yourself. So good for you, mate.
To me, this is what I'm talking about, is the fear, is that when I feel that fear, this is all I was saying. I think there's a lot of people that are stuck in careers that they didn't move through the fear. And so my child needs to learn, dude, my kid is going to get scared if they're pushing the envelope. They better get scared if you're pushing the envelope in anything you do. And you just need to move through it. It literally feels like a barrier about this big for me. I always know the feeling. I've not ever heard anybody describe it like this, but I think other people, there's literally, I feel a mass that I just need to move through. And then the older I get, now I'm starting to communicate it so that other people become comfortable with communicating in corporations. Hey, you know what? I have that too. And that's going to make this society a lot better place instead of us all walking around like I'm some rich guy on private jets. Who cares? Who cares? Okay. No one cares. What's going to care is if we can help each other elevate. And that's what this payment revolution is about.
Gary, do you think that that the appeal of earning so much money that you've got more than you ever need is becoming yesterday's fashion? Because you remember the days of it was all about stakeholder value, about making money and getting rich and things. Do you think those days are to some extent getting past?
I think actually it's getting worse. It's the Uber money event, and I think you're going to find a lot of people grossly unhappy in their lives.
Yeah, I know, because it doesn't make you happy. This is the point. I mean, we've this. So anyway. So I would say that I run a community, and I run a community of some brilliant people. I have more conversations with them about doing things that are for the greater good, for society, for the improvement of getting people into the financial system. A rising tide lifts all ships is the phrase. And if we can help everybody to be able to get better, then we'll all get better. And as you say, money doesn't make you happy, not at that level. But you get another 5 million, what difference does it make?
Well, I will say that I've been miserable with a lot of money, and I've been miserable with broke, and I like miserable and rich better than I like miserable and broke. Okay. But you know what? It's still miserable. Now, on your point on people doing good in the world, I would rather do, Monica and I have this conversation on a fairly regular basis. And my position is I would rather do a lot of good at one time than little drabs of good over periods of time. Like what you and I did last year. Like I've gone to some of these galas and I'm embarrassed by the payments industry. I'm just going to say this and be really obvious to everyone. I'm embarrassed when I sit in a room with 2,000 bank executives, all making 150 grand a year, and they raise $20,000. I'm like, wow, seriously? Really? You know what I'm talking about, Tony, okay?
Yeah.
One after another is like, seriously?
Yeah.
That's like, we're raising money for cancer or for, some really good causes. Anyway.
With your help at the Emerging Payments Awards in October, within a day, we'd raised $20,000. And that was just through a handful of people who thought this was a good idea. With your leadership, by the way, and your confrontation and your challenge to me to get me to do something I've never done in my whole life. And
you didn't lose any respect over it.
Well, no, that's true. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how I beat it next year. But anyway, but the thing that was interesting is I didn't ask many people to stump up for $1,000. I asked probably about 15, and they didn't all say yes. They should have all just said yes. Even there's one particular one who I know is just rolling in it, didn't come up with it. So why aren't people open with their money like this? Why aren't they doing it? I don't know. Don't understand it.
Yeah, well, it's probably education.
Comes back to education, comes back to the movement of money, comes back to money being a social thing.
Man, it sounds like we're starting to have a church webinar, not
yeah.
All dying together.
And it comes back to fear, of course, all the love of it.
Fear, all the negative emotions. But from an approach, just to kind of take a little bit of a step backwards, Gary, you mentioned that you're a big guy. You want to make a big move, that you're not really into the incremental gain. That, there are people who their style for leadership is they want to have an incremental gain within a profit model that other people have built. Then you have Gary. I mentioned right at the top that you're a painter. You went back to the painting, and I want to hit on that before we shut down. We're getting near the hour mark. We want to wrap up, but before we get to that, Gary, you paint literally, but you paint metaphorically too. You've told me that when your vision, when you're an entrepreneur, you like to have a blank sheet of paper, and then you have an eye to create something that no one thought of before. And you might be 3/4 of the way done, and you'll bring in people to fill in what you have left, but you have that creative impulse to make a new entity, a new creation altogether. When people like you who have that gift to create, how do we keep you engaged after you've done the initial creation?
Well, I don't think that you're going to keep anyone engaged in anything. I think, I don't think you can trap animal spirits. And also don't think that like you can make someone be really naturally good at what I do, like the blank canvas concept. And I don't think there's an A and a B or a, hey, I'm really good at that, so it makes me special. Dude, it's just what I do. It's in my makeup, right? My DNA. And I recognized it when I was really young. I realized, hey, I'm not set up to play a game where now it's just like robotic. And there's nothing wrong with robotic. Look what Amazon has done with robotic, okay? I mean, it's crazy. There are more people in the world that are geniuses at incremental phases and growth that are far more important than anything I've ever done. I mean, monsterly, but I get bored. So after 5, 6, 8 years, I want to move on to like something a bit more artistic and risky, okay? Scary, I like the edgy stuff, okay? It makes me feel alive, okay? I mean, I love serious rock and roll and guitars that are like freaking out and going crazy and hard drums and then some cello guy. I dig that stuff. Piano, yeah, okay, it's nice. But there are people that do incremental stuff like that's brilliant. And I think there's people that do incremental stuff for 15, 20 years and they should transition, but they get stuck.
Maybe they're limited by fear.
They create their own. You said, hey, how do we keep you engaged? Dude, just let me do what I do. Let me just chase my dream, chase my heart. And sometimes I need to be corralled in a little bit, but like trying to corral somebody like me in too much is not really healthy for me. And it's probably not healthy for the people around me. And Tony's met like a lot more of these people than I have, both in the increment, like Monica's a brilliant structural, hey, let's grow an idea. Like she's really great at that. And I don't step on her feet on that because I'm not good at it. I guess I could be, but I don't want to be, right? So, Tony?
Yeah, to me, what you're talking about is just self-knowledge. And again, let's be philosophical. You know, when you're out there and you're beating down doors or you're trying to make your way, just be cognizant of your strengths and your weaknesses and stick at the things that you're brilliant at doing. What are your unique abilities? And find a way of doing those day in, day out. And you know what? The world will work. It's struggling. You know, I've 6 months ago, I took on a chief executive to run the company for me. I haven't had a better 6 months, honestly. I've just been in my zone, doing my industry leadership stuff, some lobbying, some thought leadership, some commenting and having some fun. And it's been wonderful. And it's not that I shouldn't have been doing it. When I did it, I had to do it. But now that's somebody who can brilliant at doing a chief executive's job, and it's not me. So
I'm so glad. Excuse me, Scott. I know that we're running up on time, but I'm so glad you said that because for the innovators, for the guys that are sitting at Lloyd's Bank or TA or Visa and me and other people, but in particular, some of these new startups that are worth $300 billion, $3 billion. Some of the people that start the company should not be running these companies. And like, I am not a guy that should be the CEO forever and ever and ever of a company, depending on what you think you mean by CEO, which I think that is grossly misunderstood. In fact, all titles today are pretty irrelevant in my opinion. They don't mean crappily. I mean, it's just, what does it mean? Chief Education Officer would be the best definition to me of a CEO. But I don't think most of the companies, Adam Newman of WeWorks for sure should not have been running WeWorks. Yeah. Okay, it had gotten so big and I mean, he's an anomaly on the conversation. I think he's done a lot of damage to the innovators in the fintech revolution and the whole entrepreneurial of the 21st century. But unfortunately, and I think there's more good people out there than there are the Adam Newmans of the world. But I would suggest many guys running companies and creating companies relook at their position at that company. And do not let your ego make you, for the family of that company, don't let your ego say, I have to be the parent, okay, of this company, because like what I do, there's a time for me to hand it off to somebody and say, hey, you can run this better than I can. You have a better mindset. You know how to set structures up.
Yeah.
And I can go off into the weeds and go look for new projects and new business development.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Brilliant.
Too many people get stuck in this thing, you know, that I have to be that guy.
Gary and Tony, anything more you want to share before we wrap up?
No, I just want to say thanks for being open to this sort of conversation. I think it's really important, and I feel entirely honored and privileged to have had a great intro from you, Scott, some very lovely facilitation. And Gary, my friend, what a star. Thank you for being so open. This is how we should be.
Great to see you guys. Thank you, Scott. Tony, great to see you as always, buddy. Love that shirt. Okay. I wear a medium now. I'm no longer a big guy. Medium.
I love, and I tell you what, I love your art as well. So fantastic.
Thank you,
I wear extra medium. I have a new size.
And
all right. Thank you for tuning into Thought Leadership in the FinTech Revolution. We hope you enjoyed our maiden trek down the FinTech wormhole. Gary Cardone, Tony Craddock, thank you very much for joining us and grappling about the really big issues. We'll be back in 1 month and maybe even before that. Now, go make money.